55, resuming the debate adjourned on May 15, 2012 on the motion for second reading of Bill 55, an act to implement budget measures and to enact and amend various acts.
Further debate. The member from Nepean.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And may I thank you very much to the Government House Leader. I know he always loves when I get up to speak. In seriousness, however, I think each member finds that at the moment that they are able to debate the budget of any given year is an extremely humbling experience. It was one that I first made my speech in this chamber, this esteemed chamber, as a member back in 2006. And I've taken that task each and every year very seriously, that I review the budget based on the values, the ideals, and the dreams of my constituents. In recent years, however, it has been also the plight of my constituents as we've seen our economy flounder. And here I am today with the views and the aspirations of my constituents that I choose to bring to the floor today on this budget. Speaker, we are in a situation where this province is losing jobs, almost tens of thousands by the month. We are in one of the most highest tax regimes we've seen, as I alluded to earlier today, in a position of having seen the highest sales tax increase in our province's history as a result of the HST that came in 2010, 2011. We know that they brought in the health premium, which is actually a tax back in 2004, and that was at the time the largest income tax increase in this province's history. Mr. Speaker, we know how through this government's green energy plan that we are subsidizing green power off the backs of middle-class families, of seniors on a fixed income, and of small businesses who are struggling to create those jobs we need for a full economic recovery. And Speaker, we know in rural communities, of which I am proud to represent, we are being hard hit, not only by a budget that doesn't represent them, but by an attack on rural values as it pertains to the horse racing industry. Mr. Speaker, there are real stories, real consequences as a result of this government's action or, in some cases, lack thereof. There are stories of people that you visit, that you talk to, that share their problems, that share what they hope could happen. You see, for many years, Ontario was the leader in Confederation. We had the best, the most robust, the most optimistic economy. People came here from around the world. They came here from other provinces, and I should know, as does my colleague from Welland. We came here from a little province called Nova Scotia. And this was the place that you could realize that dream of having a full-time job. It was the place that you could realize the dream of home ownership. And it was the place where you could realize the dream of growing your family. That's the province that I came to. The economic engine of Confederation. Unfortunately, with our high taxes and this government's lack of focus on government spending, we see a very different Ontario today, one that is lagging in economic growth behind the prairies and Newfoundland and Prince Edward Island at times. We have significant challenges in this province, and the people that I represent feel it every single day. They know, for example, that every single dollar they spend to Queen's Park that they send here is not being spent wisely. They've heard over the years, and my goodness, Speaker, they are some angry about the waste and mismanagement at eHealth. That's $1 billion boondoggle. And at the time, we thought it couldn't get any worse. In fact, this government brought in legislation and promised it wouldn't. But then it did, Speaker. We ended up with Orange. We don't even know the true rot. We don't know the true loss of public dollars to that massive scandal, and we've been asking for months now for a select committee to find out where people's taxpayer dollars are in this province. Now, Speaker, I want to talk directly about how this impacts the people that I represent. We have personal care workers here today. Let me tell you a story. Mr. Duncan, the finance minister, stood before this House on Budget Day and he told us the third largest spending priority of his government is the debt and the deficit. We are in a massive deficit and our debt has tripled since they've taken office. Now, what does this mean, Mr. Speaker? In Mr. Duncan's own words, let me paraphrase, every single dollar taken away from health care and education goes toward the budget. More effectively, Mr. Speaker, let me say it this way. Every single dollar we spend on interest to foreign banks is a dollar that is less spent here in Ontario, in our hospitals, and in our education sector, front lines in our schools. Let us put this into perspective. We spend more servicing the debt and the deficit than we do on every other government department combined outside of education and healthcare. That's what this government has done. And let me say this, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to talk about a brief meeting I had at one of my constituents' office, or one of my constituents' home, in a small rural village in the city of Ottawa. They live in a trailer park. Not a lot of insulation in their home. Their water quality is poor. I've been on the case in Linwood Trailer Park for a long time. I dropped by this family's house just before Christmas. I wanted to say thank you to them for all the things that they had done for me over the year. And when we got talking about Facebook, I sort of said to them, well, just log in right now. They looked at me across their kitchen table and they said, we can't. We can't afford to turn on our computer during the day. They said, you'll notice we don't have any lights on during the day either. And then they further told me that they don't put their heat on during the day. Thankfully, that was a mild day. We have people who are being forced to choose between heating and eating in this province because this government has leveled a tax burden on them that is simply unsustainable. And, Mr. Speaker, then they look back at this government spending all that money on the debt and the deficit because they haven't been able to control it. We look at them spending money on Orange and at eHealth, and, Mr. Speaker, they can't understand it. They can't fathom that Chris Mazza was making $1.5 million when $500,000 would be more than almost every trailer in that park. Speaker, I must say that it shocks me. And then I speak to my constituents who are in the horse racing industry at Rideau Carleton Raceway. Speaker, it would make you cry. I want to tell you the story of Ricky Sullivan, who I spent some time with in the last 2 weeks. Ricky Sullivan would break your heart. This is what he told to the Manotick Messenger when I was with him. I'm almost 50. I have cancer. I have sclerosis of the liver, and I'm looking at losing everything. Sullivan owns a farm and a training centre in Stagecoach Road. I'm proud to say it's in Nepean Carleton. 60 horses, 3 barns, a training facility, and a track on his farm. The end of the slots to racetrack programs, he says, will wipe him out. Let me read his quote to you. When you hear something like this, at first, you don't believe it, but it's real. My little farm is not going to survive this. We're going to lose everything. And then we have about a dozen people working there that are going to be out of jobs. My hydro bills are about $1,000 to $1,100 a month, and insurance on our farm is about $8,000 to $10,000 a year. We won't be able to afford either. We're screwed. That's what this government has done to my constituents. I'm ashamed that they have gone ahead with this budget without consulting the very people that they are going to put out of business and in some cases put out of house and home. And they're not alone. It's the small businesses. It's my constituent who owns the electricity store in Bell's Corners, who says his heating bill alone will force him not to be able to hire summer students this year. And, Mr. Speaker, on the backdrop of this is Orange, and we've been calling for a public inquiry into this. We've been asking for a select committee. This government has refused, and that's why I, right now, will call for adjournment of debate.
Ms. MacLeod has called for adjournment of the debate. Is it the pleasure of the House that the motion carry? I believe the yeas have it. Call in the members. This will be a 30-minute bell.